In this video, I'm going to talk about multi-shot photography as opposed to taking a single shot of artwork that you're capturing. In past, what we've used, and we still use it quite a bit, is this 4x5 camera right here. Well, actually, we have two of them. And the 4x5 camera covers an area at about 36 by 48 at 300 DPI. What people are doing more and more is using cameras and using multi-shot, where you take multiple shots of a piece of artwork and then stitch them together for a high resolution image. And that's what we're doing more and more of with this. This is a Fuji GFX100, which is 102 megapixels. This is a better light 4x5, which is 150 megapixels. So this medium format camera has about 2/3 of the pixels of that. The only difference there is that the larger camera has 3 individual sensors, R, G, and B, that get stacked together. So all those silly details out of the way, what we're doing is multi-shot photography, where we shoot something multiple times. And I'm going to walk through our entire process. How we do this is much like how we do it with the other cameras, in that we start with a mirror and a laser. So the very first thing that we do is we put a mirror on the wall here in front of the camera. And then we have this laser here. This laser box, where it comes from, is in analog photography. This was used for the enlarger. When you were developing your photographs, you would use this. Anyway, so what we do here with this is we put this on the front of the lens and we shine it into the mirror. And the idea is that in order to get this as parallel as possible, what we want to do is get it so that the laser goes right back into itself, and you can see if it's off one way or the other. You really want it to be just as close as possible so that it's parallel to the wall. And then we can lock down the tripod, and subsequent shots with this will be, when we stitch them together, there won't be any skew. There won't be any image skew where the image was off. Now, if you're trying to do this at home, you obviously don't have a rail system like this that was built with an Arduino. What you can still do, and even if you don't have a laser, is to make sure that your camera is parallel to the surface of the painting or artwork that you're trying to photograph. There are various ways to do that. The next thing that we do, once we've got this mirror aligned, is we put a color card here on the wall, so that it's right in the middle of the camera view. So what we're going to do once we have this on the wall is we're going to take a shot of this once we turn on our lights, and we're going to get that shot just exactly how we like it. We want the gray points to be a neutral gray. We want the white to be at about 232. We don't want it to be too hot because your image can get blown out. We want the blacks somewhere around 16 to 20, depending on what we're shooting. And once we have that all perfect, that becomes our reference shot in Lightroom that we use against. So the next thing I'm putting up here is a white card. We always have a nice white sheet of paper that we use to white balance the camera. And we do white balance the camera and shoot our reference shot every time we start a session photographing paintings. We also build profiles for the camera, and we do this in the same way as when we shoot the color card for reference. We want to get the card in as perfect of a shot as we can, and we use that to build the camera profile, which is used later on, although I'm not going to go into that in this detail in this video. But that's that. And now from here, what we do is we turn on the lights and focus the camera, shoot this color card for reference, and go from there in Lightroom, and I'll continue this in the desktop. So now we're ready to start a session in Lightroom now that we've laser aligned the camera to the wall. And so I'm going to start a tethered capture here with a new session for today, and start with a clean slate. Now, Lightroom's tethered capture is hooking up to the camera. Here we've got our Fuji tethered app software. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start off by trying to get the best shot that we can. I'm going to look at the white point, and it looks a little low. Let's check that out. I'm at about 232. Now this is a good spot to be at, about 232, and my blacks are about 25. Now here I've got different user presets that we've made. And I'm going to start off with our preset for the Fuji GFX100 with an 80mm lens. full polar. I've got a polarization on the camera, and I've got polarizing sheets on the lights so that we're using cross polarization. And I'm going to white balance. And the way that we're going to white balance is we're going to pick a spot right here in the white card and shoot it. And it says over. And what that means is that I'm overexposed. And you can see right here it said completed. Now oftentimes when we do this, what we have to do is make the shot a little bit darker than what we're going to use for our session, because if it's too bright, the camera doesn't like it for the white balance. So I'm going to set this back to where it was. It's about 237 on my white point. So here's where we take our reference shot. And what we do is we've got our preset here that we're using, which tells us which lens we're using and a few other details. But we want to customize this session. So again, right here, I'm at about 221. So what I need to do now is select the gray point. And what that does is neutralizes the image so that we've got good white or good gray balance. And I can now look at my white point. I'm going to take my white point and adjust it just a little bit in post so that I'm at about 236. I really don't want to go above that. Seen people go as high as 242, and I've done it sometimes, but I really feel like if you blow out your shot, there's nothing you can do. But if it's a little underexposed when you're done, you can always bring those colors back. I'm going to look at the black next, and the black's at about 24, 25. I feel like I kind of want the blacks a little bit darker. I'm at 20. That's where I want them. What you're after is using the gray squares in your color card to gray balance your image, using the white card up here to set the white balance in your camera, checking your white here to make sure it is at a good spot. By that I mean around 236, and here at around 20 for your blacks. Now my blacks are good, my whites are good. I've got a clean color card that's got a neutral gray balance to it, and this becomes our reference shot. This is the shot that we're going to use to synchronize all the other shots after this. So now at this point what we do is we start putting artwork up on the wall, and we take multiple shots. And in Lightroom what we're going to do here is we're going to sync this color card across those shots and then stitch them together for a single image, then export that for editing in Photoshop. And that's where in Photoshop where we'll do most of the color editing. So here what we're doing is just giving ourselves a really good starting point. Then once we're done in Lightroom, we'll edit these, we'll fine tune them in Photoshop. Okay, so now that we have our reference shot done and our white card done, and we've white balanced the camera and everything is ready to go, we are ready to start shooting. So I'm going to do a little autofocus here. We put this on the wall. This is a whale painting by Joyful Enrique. And we're going to start moving it about in front of the camera and taking shots of it. Using our rail system here, move this thing about. So there I am ready to take my first shot. And what we do now is we're just going to start taking these shots till we have all of them. And now we have our shots. So we photographed this image with 6 shots. And the first thing I want to do is take this color card here and this shot that we've made some minor adjustments to. And we click onto the last image here, shift click onto those and sync. And what we're doing is synchronizing the adjustments on this color card to the rest of our shots. At this point, what I'm going to do is then select all of these, press Control M for merge, and Lightroom is going to merge these into a single image for us. There's our shot. It looks like it was able to stitch it together with no problem, and we're going to say merge and go from there. You can see now that once it's merged those images, it stacked them all. Something I like Lightroom. So you don't have to look at all your individual shots. Here we have a series of shots and our stacked image, our stitched images stacked on top for us to look at. At this point, what we're going to do is export this image and we will usually save it as a TIFF file. I like working in TIFF files. We'll save this out, check the size on it, and edit in Photoshop. So we're going to export this image. I'm going to save it as All My Life 18 by 36. Now it's not going to come out as that in Lightroom, and I'll show you what I mean here in just a second once that's exported. Now that that's exported, we can open this up in Photoshop, and the problem with figuring out DPI or PPI in between Lightroom and Photoshop is the Lightroom wants to export that at 300 PPI, 300 pixels per inch, and it's not really that size, and it's going to change depending on where the camera is in relationship to the artwork. So we know that these crop lines that he's created here are where really the 18 by 36 should be. So let's drag our ruler here and see what it is. It is 66, and this should be 36. And so when you're resizing images, what you'll do here is uncheck this resample so that we're just redistributing how the existing pixels are displayed or printed without really affecting the number of pixels that there are. This is a lot easier if you actually crop to the image before you size it, but what I'm going to do is leave these edges on here just the way they are for now. I'm going to say 40.5. Now, perfect. So now that I've resized that, you can see that what we have for a final image is this is going to be 36 by 18 at 550 DPI, 550.6 at where we've got the camera in relation to the wall. And that's always going to change a little bit unless you have your camera set in a certain spot in relation to your artwork, and you just never change it. But when you go into Photoshop, at any rate, you need to massage your piece into the size that it's going to be printed at and change the parameters here in image size by unchecking resample and just redistributing the existing pixels by changing the actual resolution so you have the size that it actually is. And again, if we're cropping into an image, and like if I had cropped into where those crop marks are, it would have been much easier because then I could have just gone in right here and put 36. But as I'm leaving the sloppy edges, because sometimes I like to reproduce them like this, when they're going to be stretched, it gives the illusion that, more of an illusion that you have an original piece here. This point, all of our editing is done in Photoshop. I've got the size corrected now. I will go in to file information, and I have a routine that will put in things like the copyright and our name and URL, etc., artist name, and I think it's important to go into the file information and put all the things that you want there. It says a lot about when the shot was taken, what cameras and parameters were used, the name of the artist, and if the file ever gets out there in the wild, at least people can find the original owner, which is one thing. But even for your own reference, it's nice to have that data in there. I'm kind of big on creating a good shot and having good data in the meta information areas there. This, I'm just using the healing stamp tool. I'm going to just clone out the edges here so that they're consistent. This part is not really that important because it's not the part of the painting that's going to be reproduced. But I do like to do this so that if we make a reproduction that includes all of this area here, it really is rather impactful before you stretch it. It looks a lot like the original. It's really crazy. Most times though, people, what they're going to do is they're going to do some kind of edge on their canvas, whether or not it's cloned edges or a colored edge, etc. But for our particular editing purposes of creating a raw file to work from, I'm going to go ahead and leave those there. At this point, it goes off into Photoshop land. So I'm going to save that for another video. I'm going to shoot another image here for us to look at. Then I'd like to do one that's more complicated and show you where there are times when we're using Lightroom where there are too many images to stitch and Lightroom doesn't do a great job. It's too complicated for Lightroom to handle. And in that case, we use a tool that's called PTGui. PTGui can stitch hundreds of images if necessary. It's used for panoramic editing and 360-degree photography. And I'll show you that here in a subsequent image in this video. Okay, so back to our camera here. We're going to shoot another image, and with this image I'm going to take a lot of shots, and I'm going to use PTGui to show you how we stitch those together using that tool. So here we go, clickety click. Okay, so there we are. We've got a whole bunch of turtle shots here. And what I'm going to do is just what I've done before on the first one. And that is I'm going to select the color card that we've used for reference. And I'm going to take that color card and select it. And then I'm going to shift click onto the last image here and sync these so that they take the adjustments that we put on the color card. Now that I've got all that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these images and export them, and then we're going to stitch them together in PTGui. I'm going to export them. I'm just going to call them turtle 1 through whatever with our starting number and export. So we have exported now a grand total of 12 files for that painting. What we're going to do here is select all of these files and drop them into PTGui. Here we have PTGui, and PTGui, we're going to start with a new project. Select all these and select that one, and we're just going to dump them into PTGui here. Now, there are a lot of things that you can do in PTGui, and I'm not going to go into depth in this video, but I am just going to say that this is a tool that we use for stitching multi-shot photography. It's a fantastic tool. One of the things that you can do is you can select control points between images. If PTGui is not sure how to line up these images, I can, for example, select and add control points. Like if I clicked on the fish's nose here and then clicked on it there, etc., or on these spikes, and then went and aligned the images, it will have an easier time finding them. So what I do, go back to Control Assistant here. I'm just going to say align images and see if it can do it on its own. It probably can, in which case I don't need to add any control points. This is an amazing tool for stitching images together. As you can see, it took all 12 of those images and put them together with no problem. If there were problems, we can always go back to those control points and add control points until it gets it. Very seldom do we need to do that. With PTGui, the more shots you have, the better. With Lightroom, the fewer the better. That has been our experience. So when you take a lot of shots with a lot of overlap, PTGui just does a fantastic job of finding the right control points to put them together. And doing that with no problem. Now that we've got that, what we're going to do is say create our panorama. We wanted to export that panorama. I'm going to select TIFF and not JPEG because it is going to be a very large image with a width of 22,134 pixels by 15,353 pixels wide. So I'm going to say blended panorama, and we're going to call this thing Better Together 24 by 36, and we're going to export that and say create panorama. Now, just like with Lightroom, when we do the stitching in PTGui, once we're done with the basic stitching, we go off into Photoshop land where we do the final editing. We're going to open this up in Photoshop, and just as we did with Lightroom, we're going to have to resize this. If we just cropped into this like this, it would be very easy for me to just, I'm going to do it once just to show you what I mean. This is where the artist wants us to crop the image. There are crop lines. So there's a 24 by 36, but it's not going to be 24 by 36 because the camera really doesn't know where it is in relation to the wall. It's actually much larger than that at 300 dpi. So with the resample unchecked, we're going to say 36. Sure enough, it's about 24 by 36. So what we would end up doing here in this point is making 24 by 36.197, and then coming in here and changing the canvas size. So now we have a perfect 24 by 36. I might come in with a healing brush tool and fix that little piece along the bottom there to make that perfect. But now the image is sized and it's ready to go off and used. Well, now it's ready to go off and we're ready to make color proofs of it and check the color on it and have a reproduction file. So that is that. That's both, that gives you an example of how we edit images directly in Lightroom to get them prepped for final color editing, and how we use PTGui for more advanced stitching in multi-shot photography. But both of these tools are very valuable, and using a medium format camera and multi-shot in addition to our 4x5 cameras has definitely given us more flexibility and made us better at what we do. Hope this has been a help, and happy shooting.